I'm joined today by Paul Baay, CEO of Touchstone Exploration, the largest independent onshore oil and gas producer in Trinidad, and who have just announced the completion of the acquisition of the Shell Trinidad Central Block asset. Thanks for joining me, Paul.
Thanks for chatting with me today. Appreciate that.
No problem. So, Paul, for new listeners, could you just give us a quick overview of Touchstone, please?
Sure. Touchstone's international oil and gas company. It trades on the Toronto and the London AIM exchange. Um, Small work staff based out of Calgary. Our major producing properties are all in Trinidad. We went public on June 26th of 2017 on the AIM exchange at about I think it was about 7.25p when we did that. And we currently are, as I say, producing both gas and oil in Trinidad and an active operator.
Okay, thank you. So it's probably fair to say that it's been a bit of a bumpy road the last 6 to 12 months. With your recent update showing a decline in production. I think you had some sort of rig and wellbore issues at the Cascadura project, and the share price has taken a little bit of a tumble since. But are the company now at a turning point, given forward development plans and the stabilization of production?
Yeah, I think that's a bumpy road, maybe a bit of an understatement. It definitely has been a little choppy, but I think you talked about that decline production. I think that was probably a little bit on us not putting the expectations right. I mean, these wells we're drilling in Trinidad are very big gas wells, come on at very high rates, and then they sort of decline almost like a fractured well. You get a fairly steep decline, and then they level out.
Mm.
And there had only been two wells, gas wells, like this on the island before we drilled them. So we didn't have a lot of a model to base it off of, a lot of data points. And we only did about 36-hour tests when we originally tested the wells because you're only allowed to flare so much gas. So, bottom line is they didn't meet expectations, but I think with the data that we had at the time, we did our best to give the best estimate. It was wrong. But what we now have is with the additional wells we drilled, we've now got a database that we can be, I think a little more accurate on how these wells are going to come on initially, and that's what we built into the model. So you talk about that decline, that's kind of this natural decline when we brought on these new wells in Q4. You see these steep declines in Q1, and then they level out, and you'll see that for Q2, Q3, Q4 as we go forward. But yeah, I think that definitely was, it's obviously a disappointment to us as well. But the takeaway is you get all your money back in 3 or 4 months on these wells, in that steep period, and then after that, it runs for 15 or 20 years. So we need to kind of refocus, get everybody, including ourselves, refocused on that plateau, that flat part of the production, which we're entering into. So.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Well, obviously you just raised $20 million and you've secured a US $30 million loan facility to fund the development and the acquisition. What was the rationale for raising at the equity level? And does this now leave the company fully funded for your development plans and operations going forwards?
Yeah, the short answer to that is yes, we are fully funded now. And the idea was that the 30 million that we did in debt, did the purchase of Central Block, which we can talk about a little bit more afterwards. But so that 30 million covered that entirely. And then what we did with the 20 million is we wanted to make sure that we were fully funded to be able to ramp up the drilling program on our development acreage, our existing development acreage, as well as the development acreage that we picked up under the acquisition. And when we did the acquisition, we actually brought on 2,000 barrels of oil equivalent a day. So on a per share basis, by doing the raise, then it wasn't dilutive because you're adding, cash flow at the same time as you're doing the raise. Obviously, it would have been nicer to do it at a higher level, but I think what we really needed to do was lock in that capital program between now and the end of the year, which is a really aggressive capital program. And this way, we're fully funded and we can just kind of run with it.
Yeah, okay. So you mentioned Central Block there, and obviously, it's the acquisition from Shell. It sort of appears to be a bit of a game changer deal for Touchstone. What was the rationale behind the acquisition? I mean, why do you think Shell gave up the asset? I'm sure there's a reasonable answer for that. But what attracted to you? What attracted you to the asset?
Yeah, we've been trying to buy this asset for 5 years.
Mm,
I've always kind of referred to it as the holy grail of onshore Trinidad. And the reason for that is it's a plant that was built about almost 20 years ago now. And it's interconnected to all the different pipelines on the island. So you can sell the gas from that plant anywhere on the island. And for those that aren't aware of Trinidad, it's actually a very industrial island. And it's got two main sources. It's got the petrochemical business, which is ammonia, urea, all of the methanol, um, which pays a decent price for gas. And then it's got an LNG market. I think it's the sixth or seventh largest LNG plant now in the world is there. And it obviously pays a much higher price because it's selling gas to like the UK and South America and Asia. So the reason that plant and that property was so important to us and why we spent 5 years getting our hands on it is it allows you to sell to any of these markets. It really opens that up for us. And we
hmm
actually came close a couple of times on buying this, but at the end of the day, we got a call last October, and Shell was doing a worldwide sort of mandate within the corporation to reduce a certain percentage in each one of their countries that they operate in. And this only made up about 4 or 5% of Shell's production in Trinidad. They're very big here. It's one of their bigger producing countries. And it's also their only onshore asset. Everything else is offshore. So through our relationship that we had at senior levels at Shell, we were the obvious buyer of it because we're the only ones that operate other gas facilities
mm.
onshore Trinidad. And basically, they said we got to announce it by the end of the year. So from October to December, we got down and got it done, and away we went. We get a plant that today would probably cost us 60 to 80 million dollars to build. We get gas that's about 2,000 BOEs a day. We get access to the LNG plant and the pipelines, and we basically paid $23 million for it. So you could see why we needed to get it done and wanted to get it done quick. And the other thing is they haven't done anything on this property in 20 years. And we think there's a lot of things we can do to ramp up the production on it.
Sounds like a good deal to me. Okay, so now the company are fully funded then, what does the remainder of the year look like operationally in terms of further development wells at Cascadura and operations at the Shell Trinidad acquisition?
Yeah, that was one of the other things I probably should have mentioned when we were talking about raising the capital. Um, because the way we're situated, we were able to start spending that money right away. There's no big lag, like we're not sitting on the cash for a long time. So, a week ago, we started the drilling at Cascadura, going to drill a couple of development wells at Cascadura. Then we're immediately going to move down to the central block, drill a couple of development wells up there. In a perfect world, I'm hoping that we can move back up and even drill a couple more wells at Cascadura before the end of the year. We're just in the midst of putting our guidance together, and we will come out with some new guidance with the acquisition, but we're still getting the final data from Shell. We haven't got all that data yet. And until we get that, we want to make sure that we've got it. I'd rather get the guidance correct than do it quick and get it wrong. So we're just making sure that we've got all that data. So to give you an idea, we haven't drilled 6 wells in the last 2.5 years, and looks like ideally we'd like to drill 6 wells in the next 5 or 6 months. So it gives you an idea how this program's going to be ramping up now.
Hmm. Okay, well, that was one of my next questions actually was about would you be putting some guidance out? I think historically, you had some targets and they haven't quite been met yet. But obviously, we touched on that earlier. So yeah, it'll be good to see some sort of formal guidance come out. But I guess that takes a little bit of time to sort of plan to get it right, so to speak, and not over expect set expectations.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
just a quick comment on that. I think the guidance wasn't met partly because of the wells and partly because we had to build gas plants and pipelines in Trinidad to bring these on, and it took longer than we thought, and in some cases significantly longer because we needed some more government approvals. We made these discoveries in 2019. There hadn't been any onshore gas discoveries in Trinidad in 20 years, and we then had to test them, build plants, get them tied in, get contracts, and I know there was some disappointment in how long it took, but that's kind of all behind us now. We've that I'll call it the boring part of the
Hmm.
this cycle of
Yeah.
finding wells and bringing them on production is now on, and really we've got excess capacity at every one of the facilities we have. It's now just about drilling wells and increasing production. So it's a pretty comfortable place to be when it comes to the guidance, whereas before we had a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of the heavy lifting's been done. Okay, so obviously we've talked about development, and that I'm sure is the priority at the moment. But can you tell us about exploration upside within the Touchstone licenses and acreage? Is there significant upside there?
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked that because I know we've been focusing on the development just because it gets the cash flow rolling and everything else. But we have put together a very significant exploration program in Trinidad, and we just had a onshore bid round last year that we were successful at picking up three additional blocks to the ones that we already had. And in my opinion, you add the real value on a per share basis when you drill these exploration wells. They can be really successful. And if you look at what we did at Oratois, we basically drilled about six wells there. We've got four of them have been successful, and two of them were dry holes. That's a pretty good ratio when you look at exploration wells. And part of that is Trinidad's just hydrocarbon rich, so it makes it a little bit easier. But we have two types of exploration plays. One is basically following up on what we're producing now, so taking those same concepts onto other lands and drilling them up. And I think we've got probably two of the best when we look at Sapero and Rio Claro, two blocks that we have. Very close proximity to what we have now, be able to use the same facilities. But they're as exciting exploration plays as anything that we've got in our portfolio. One looks like it's probably gas, one looks like it's oil. And then there's a deeper play that sits below us, which is what Exxon's been drilling down in Guyana. It's called the Cretaceous. And it extends right along this trend all the way up into Trinidad, and there has been some Cretaceous wells drilled in the past by Exxon and by Talisman, but it was using an old model. This new model that Exxon's using in Guyana, we've kind of re-looked at it in Trinidad, and we think we've got three or four of those Cretaceous prospects that we'd like to drill it, and those would make anything we've got so far look quite small. Um, but we have the rig capability. It sits on our same acreage. It's just a little bit deeper. And when I say deeper, it's roughly between 10 and 12,000 feet, and we're drilling right now between 7 and 10,000. So it's not it's not like we're doubling the depth of these wells when we drill them. So what we'd ideally like to do is we roll into 2026 would have 80% of our funds flow going to development and 20% going to exploration so that you've got this continual balance of what we've done. And
Mm.
that's what we were hoping to do this year. But with the Shell acquisition and everything else that we were working on, it looks like we're going to be sort of a year behind on that. So it's the hopper is full. And really, as I said before, what we need to do is just drill these wells up. Even these new exploration wells would go into the existing facilities. So you wouldn't have that big time lag that we saw in the first discoveries.
Okay. Well, so I mean, it feels like the company's really sort of been in sort of stealth mode, if you like, up until now, but obviously, making progress, stabilizing production, of course, working on securing the acquisition, which I'd imagine would have taken quite a bit of effort. Um, do you feel now, with all the sort of cogs in place, so to speak, that Touchstone will be a significant growth story going forwards? And do you envisage building Touchstone into, say, a mid-tier oil player going forwards?
Yeah, it really does feel like we've it's a bit of what I'll call a reset. When I say a reset, it was also a corporate reset, but I think it's also an expectation and the guidance reset. We've got more data on these wells now. We know they're not going to be 40 million a day wells. We know they're going to be 14, 17, 20 million a day wells. And we're gonna, that'll get built into the guidance. So there's a bit of that reset when we go on. But when you look at the hydrocarbon basin here is the updip end of the Venezuelan basin in Trinidad. You look at, we now control all the gas infrastructure on the island onshore. We got access to all of these different contracts in what we want to do. They're short of gas on the island, so they'll take every molecule we can send them every minute of every day. So
Mm.
from the gas side, that's great. And then we made a new pool discovery at Rio Claro or at the Cascadero far end of our Cascadero pool, a new oil discovery that we're just ramping up right now. So when you talk about becoming a mid-tier, that's always been our goal. The trick has been how do you fund it? Like, do you kind of wait for the piggy bank to fill up and then drill some more wells? I think we're getting close to that stage of where this will be self-funded, right? We'll be able to do the development drilling, which will then, that cash flow, you can fund the exploration drilling, and it becomes a
Yeah.
machine that we can then go. So it's just taken it's been a little painful to get from point A to B here, and I think we're getting pretty close to that. It feels like we're at that tipping point.
Okay. Well, that sounds fantastic. Well, Paul, thanks very much for joining me today. I believe from Trinidad. Is that right?
Yeah, no, I'm down here. We had a new government came into place at the end of April, and I had a great meeting yesterday with the new energy minister, and I can say that they are making very clear they are open for business, want us here, and want to encourage us to move faster than we can. So I think it was really exciting to have that meeting.
Yeah, great. Well, look, Paul, thanks for joining us, and look forward to speaking to you again in the future.
Thanks for the time. Really appreciate it.